Welcome to the Solid Waste Committee of Thursday, March the 5th. The TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nation communities across our vast regional district, and today are located on the Tecumseh Secwepemc territory situated within the unceded and ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with Tecumseh and Secwepemc and respect the territory and the land on which we gather today. Are there any additions or deletions from today's agenda? Seeing none. Oh, the one addition is, we'll bring this forward. I'm just looking around go ahead. Oh, and Director Blackwell, you're online. You can hear us. Thank you. There is one addition that came on the agenda, that the committee allow for non-appointed board members to participate in committee discussions related to the agenda. And with that, I see Director Ranta coming in. And just looking at corporate officer, is that piece going to come later in the agenda for Director Ranta? We're just approving whether a non-committee member can speak.
That is correct. We'll just need a vote for that, but that would be allowed to allow the non-committee members to participate throughout the entire agenda.
And so my guidance right now is take that vote now.
Yes, please.
Okay. Moved by Director Smith, seconded by Director Onslow. All in favor?
Aye.
That is passed. Thank you. And with that, I get the minutes, item number 4.1, Finance Committee meeting minutes for October, if we can get a recommendation.
Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
I believe I gave you the wrong printout for the agenda. So I can get you another one. I just had that resolution there, so apologies.
So item 4.1 is a Regional Solid Waste Management Committee meeting, right? Is that the right one? Recommendation of the minutes of the Regional Solid Waste Management Committee dated October 22nd be adopted as circulated. Moved by Director Grenier, second by Director Hutton. All in favor?
Aye.
That is moved. That is approved. 5.1, the letter from Village of Cache Creek. And with this, I will, as we did item number 3, we approved a non-committee member to be sitting in and participating in this discussion, but no votes will be allowed by that member. And with that, Director Ranta, if you would like to take the floor and share your thoughts on this piece, please.
Sure, I'm happy to, and thank you for allowing me to speak at this meeting. Many of you will remember that there was a proposal by the Bonaparte Indian Band to establish another landfill directly adjacent to the existing Cache Creek landfill. And they met with and worked with the Thompson-Nicola Regional District. And it got to about the third phase of the process. There's a process on your agenda identified, and that's where public consultation comes in. And quite frankly, the only way that the Village of Cache Creek knew that this proposal was coming forward is because a member of the Solid Waste Committee came to me and said, hey, did you know that there's a proposal to have another landfill within your village adjacent to the existing landfill? And I didn't know anything about it at that time. And it was ultimately rejected by the Village of Cache Creek and the TNRD. But because the consultation process doesn't happen until phase 3 of the process for establishing an amendment to the waste management plan, it got way down the road long before the Village of Cache Creek was ever notified. And the Village of Cache Creek Council believes that the process should be changed, and I think it is different in Metro Vancouver Regional District, that if there's a proposal within a municipal boundary, the municipality is notified sooner in the process, in phase one of the process. And we feel that that could have saved the First Nations a lot of money. They hired consultants to develop their proposal, and ultimately it was rejected. But because the process didn't notify the village of Cache Creek sooner, they wasted an awful lot of money on a process that ultimately was rejected. And we feel as if there should be notification if there's a proposal to amend the waste management plan, either within a municipality or within the fringe area. I see fringe areas on the agenda in the committee of the whole meeting. But we feel as if there should be notification sooner of the municipality affected, and that would have saved First Nations and the village a lot of anguish, and First Nations, it would have saved them a lot of money. So what we would like to see is a change to the process that's identified on your agenda, so that a municipality that is proposed to have a waste management facility located within its boundaries or in the fringe area, they should be notified sooner. So that's what the request is about. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Ranta, for that insight. And if I remember that meeting that was presented here. Any questions for Director Ranta before I go to Mr. Vieira for the report? Mr. Vieira.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that background, Director Ranta. So just to summarize what's in the report before you, what is attached is our current policy. This policy was created fairly recently, that the board approved back in 2023. And so what, I'll skip ahead here. So you'll notice in the report, I have not actually provided a staff recommendation because in this process, the initial letter was sent to the board. The board referred it to the committee for consideration. If I can get this to work. Next slide, please. Give up on that. So as Director Ranta mentioned, this is the process that we follow. So if you could just click the next slide button. This is step 1C. I know this is a lot of detail here, but that's the step where if a proponent comes forward after working with staff to review the process and make considerations of what they want to make a formal request, then it goes to the board at that step 1C. So what I'm proposing from a staff perspective, that if the committee wants to recommend to the board that we amend the process, that at this step would be the same time that we notify the board formally, is that at that time, we also send the same information package to any impacted municipality, which then would give them obviously foreknowledge that it's coming before the board, and they could provide input through their representative that's on this board or be welcome to attend that meeting. So still early on in the process. Yeah, any questions on that?
Yes, Director Grenier.
Just for clarity, Mr. Vieira, would it be any municipality or any affected electoral area if the proposal's in an electoral area? The idea is that the area where it's going in, the authorities of that area would be aware of it. I think that's the intent, isn't it?
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct. But the electoral area is also notified through the board process. So again, the formal notification to our board would include all the electoral area members. And so what I'm proposing here is we send that same information package formally to the village councils of any impacted areas.
I see. So because only the mayor is a director and
Correct.
then the idea is that the whole council gets, yeah.
Correct.
I see. I see. Thank you for that
One
clarification.
point of consideration, which Director Ranta mentioned, is in this specific situation, the proposal was within, or at least part of it was within the boundaries of the village of Cache Creek. Something for this committee to consider. What is that threshold? What if it's 20 kilometers away from the village? Some may have different opinions on what would impact their municipality. If it's 50 kilometers away, it still may impact the municipality. So just looking for some direction or consideration on what that is. It could be the same threshold we use for the fringe area notification, or it could be something different that we can build into this policy.
Supplemental.
So Director Ranta, does that sound like a solution to you?
Yeah, it sounds like the notification would come sooner.
Thank you, Mr. Vieira, for that. And I'm just looking at that whole steps that where you're proposing, and it makes sense because the way I'm looking at it, someone could come into your office with a proposal. It could be just a rough thought of something that's going to be moving forward. I don't think that would be the appropriate time that we're going to inform the mayor of an area that this is coming your way when it's just a preliminary. But I think that exactly spot the 1C. And I think Mr. Director Ranta has agreed that that would be the place that the mayors of the areas get informed. My only question, and if I remember correctly in the presentation, I was under the impression the First Nations did inform the village of Cache Creek of their intention prior to 1C. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, that the proponent did meet with the village, but that we, the TNRD, didn't have any notification built in our process. We had recommended, and we still would in our preliminary meetings with any proponent, that they should engage directly with any impacted parties, and we would continue to do that early on, step 1A in the process. When we meet with the proponent, we would know anything that's obvious to us. We'd say, here's other impacted parties that you should reach out to if you're considering something like this.
While I have my committee members thinking about the fringe area and the area affected, what is that kilometer radius? Corporate officer, you'd like a motion that we direct staff to implement the 1C process of notifying area mayors? Is that what we need to do?
That would be great, yes. I'll defer to Mr. Vieira though, just to make sure that if electoral area directors or anything else that needs to be added into that motion as well.
Yeah, I would, if I could suggest the motion be that the committee recommend to the board that staff bring back an amended policy for the board to consider, which would notify municipalities of any proposed solid waste amendment at the same time that the board is notified. And we could even say at step 1C.
Director Vinny?
I'd like to make that motion then.
Second by Director Onslow. All in favor?
Aye.
And at this time, do you need the area that would cover, or is that something that can come back to us for options?
I guess it could go either way if this committee wants to make a recommendation, or if we want to think on it some more when it comes to the board to make considerations on what exactly that's going to be. But open to feedback on that now. As Director Ranta pointed out, the fringe area discussion is coming up tomorrow, so that could also be discussed further tomorrow.
Director Houghton?
I think it would be prudent that the electoral area representative of the area that this is going to go in be identified singly, so that that person knows what's going on or proposed to going on in their area. I think that, if in this case, it'll probably be Director Thorpe or at the time, but it'd be nice if we know as an individual electoral area director ahead of time too. probably even before the board if we can. Thank you.
Fringe area would make sense.
Distance doesn't really mean anything. It's just if it's happening within the area, we should be notified that this is a possibility that of going ahead.
Manager Vieira, I'm just thinking, sorry, Director Onslow?
I think Director Houghton, as soon as we, as the board, are getting the notification, the municipality is getting it, like that's when I feel that if we say the EA director needs to know in advance of the staff report, that we're jumping the gun, like maybe a simple conversation to say this is happening, but I don't think that we need to put it in the policy saying that we need advance notice.
Seeing no discussion, and you mentioned fringe policies coming to the board, I think we can sort of piggyback this discussion into that and have the whole board. It may not be the only time we have to discuss this. So if that's okay, we can bring that to the whole board. Manager Vieira?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'll connect with Mr. Kraus and integrate that into the, I guess, the discussion on tomorrow. Thank
you. With that, we voted on the recommendation of Director Grenier, and we will move on to 5.2, the solid waste and recycling long-term asset renewal funding analysis. And Manager of Operations, Mr. Vieira, you're up again.
Sorry, Chair. We didn't complete the vote. There was a question regarding the electoral area director. So if we could just finalize that vote, that would be great. Thank you.
Just want to check with Director Blackwell. Is there anything in closing? Are we ready to vote? Okay. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
That is unanimously carried. Thank you. He is on the committee, yes. Okay. It's good. Now 5.2, solid waste recycling long-term asset renewal funding analysis. Manager Vieira.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to turn it over to our asset manager, Mike Winiski, to elaborate on this report. So just a quick context. This work that Mike is working on through each department is you're going to see this as board members as we work through over the next couple of years, kind of a theme of what the asset management plans and long-term outlooks look like for each department. So for those of you around this table who are on the utilities committee, you'll see that we did a similar exercise for each of the utilities. And now we've moved on to the solid waste department, and I'll turn it over to Mike to present the findings. Interesting, exciting stuff. Cool graphs.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vieira, and thank you, Chair. Is the clicker working? Yeah. All right. Yeah.
2 buttons.
Okay. Perfect. So yeah, as Jamie said, I'm kind of gone through a few of the departments now. I did the utilities department, so that committee saw a similar report. So those who have seen this kind of stuff, it might be a little bit of the same, just the kind of introduction, but we'll get into the meat and potatoes of where we sit with asset funding for the solid waste area. So just a quick overview. A few of the things that I look at are, sorry, I'll just go back one if I can. Yeah, that I look at are infrastructure deficit, asset renewal funding ratios, and life cycle funding ratios. So I'll get into what those mean and kind of what they explain, and then we'll dive into to what they mean for solid waste. So infrastructure deficit, what that is it's basically the gap between what we have currently in our reserves and the funds needed to replace our assets at the end of their life cycle. The number that it spits out basically tells us, where we sit, where we sit for funding and how we look over the long term. Couple considerations for infrastructure deficit. It's what we have right now. So, and I see that slide's a little cut off there, but basically it means if we add anything to it, we're going to have to make sure we plan for that asset renewal. So if we look at expansion to, sites, add different buildings and all that, we'll have to make sure that as we acquire those new assets, we add to the long-term funding to make sure we can plan for those renewals right now. So when we talk about infrastructure deficit, it only means what we currently have. the asset renewal funding ratio. What that means is it measures the funds that we have in relation to what we need to renew our assets to the end of their useful life. So it indicates, do we have enough money to replace the current assets? Important to note here, a healthy ratio is anywhere between 90 and 110%. Anything lower than that means that, hey, we better start saving more money for future asset renewals. Anything higher than, that 110% means we have too much money in our reserves, so we can, utilize other things, or maybe we don't need to save as much money over the long term. And then life cycle funding ratio, this kind of takes that whole thing together. So what it looks at is our operations and maintenance costs, combines that with our asset renewals, and says, do we have enough money over the course of the asset life to operate, maintain, and then renew it? So it's kind of just a holistic kind of view of everything that we have, making sure that we have the right amount of funding to cover our asset renewals. So getting into the current state of where we sit with solid waste, the planned replacement value of all the assets that we have is about 25 million, just over $25 million. That's in today's dollars, and that's kind of how we look as we're planning with today's dollars. The neat thing for solid waste is a lot of the assets are fairly new. 2013, 2012 is kind of when the large amount of our assets came into our portfolio. So I don't even really have a 10-year renewal requirement. It's fairly low. It's about $125,000, which we'll see there. But the 15-year renewal the 25-year renewal requirement, is about $15 million. So it gets quite a bit higher. And then as we get into that 50-year, it's $41 million is what we're looking at for renewal requirements. Important thing about that, though, is that you look at that and say, well, we only have $25 million worth of assets. Why do we have $41 million worth of renewal requirements? That's because certain assets last, 20 years, some last 10 years. That accounts for that second and third replacement of those assets within the portfolios. And we'll kind of see a few examples of that as we go through it. So our infrastructure deficit, this is kind of what we are short based on current funding outlook, is $125,000 over 10 years, very manageable. Over 25 years, it's 2.6 million. And then over 50 years, it's about 15 million. So our 50-year asset renewal funding ratio, which is the only one I really highlighted, is 61%. Important thing about that is that as we sit right now, we're in really good shape. We have money over the near term. But as we look longer and longer out, when those assets that we just recently got, I'm thinking like, garbage buildings, recycled buildings, block walls, railings, that type of stuff that lasts a long time. We actually are showing in our long-term models that we don't currently have the funding plan to renew those assets. So those are the ones that we're really looking at to make sure that we're keeping in the back of our mind that we want to make sure we renew them over the next, or save to renew them over the end of their life cycle. The life cycle funding ratio is 99% over 50 years. That's great. That looks really good. The important thing about that, though, is don't get lost in that 99% thinking that we're perfect, even though we're pretty darn close, because the difference in that is about $15 million, which is that number you see under infrastructure deficit. That difference equates to almost 60% of all our assets in our portfolio. So how we do absolutely nothing today or nothing, over the next 50 years to make up that infrastructure deficit, we would basically not have 60% of our current assets, meaning we'd have to close facilities or change how we provide our service to our people, the public. So very important to note. Upcoming renewals. So what we're looking at right now is in 2031, we're going to have to replace the IMCO walking floor trailers. That's about half the fleet. Kind of a neat thing that we talked about that we are looking at doing, though, is sticking with that model. So every 10 to 15 years, replace half the fleet and make sure we're kind of maintaining that as we go along. Important thing with doing that is someone would say, well, why don't you just do 1 or 2 trailers a year? If we do about half every 10 years, we keep our buying power up. So, when we have a fleet of 10 trailers at, a couple $100,000 each, we have that larger buying power to get, discounts as we go to buy them. And also we're turning over our fleet in a way that works for us. So we don't have, say, the whole amount of trailers out at one time, but we also don't have a few little ones pulling out, and we're not getting any buying power from our availability to buy multiple trailers at one time. The next kind of big renewal is in 2038. Those are things like the recycle shelters, not the big buildings, but the smaller shelters. The scales will probably have to be renewed around that time. The buildings for the scale houses will have to get the attendant buildings. Those will have to get renewed. So we'll want to make sure we're planning for those. That totals around $2.35 million. Long-term renewal is another walking floor trailer renewal, the Titan ones. Those are the trailers that we just bought. So we're looking at, about 20 years for those in their lifespan. The fencing and railings, I kind of group those together. As we get further down the line with this, we'll have a way better idea of the exact state of our fencing and railings. But right now, we just want to make sure we're earmarking funding to renew those in the future. So I show about $1.8 million for the total for all the sites. And then the big one is that $9.8 million, which is our recycled garbage buildings. So once again, in 2063, it doesn't mean that we're going to replace those, brand new buildings. We'll refine this as we get close to that time, but we want to make sure that we're earmarking funding for that replacement for whatever could happen close to that time, right? So maybe it's just the roof, maybe it's various aspects of the building, or it's the whole building together. We don't really know what it's going to look like in 2063, but we want to make sure that we're planning now to save for that future amount. So I gave you a little graph here just to kind of show you how this looks, everything I just said. So a little bit tough to see the green line, but the green line, I don't know if this one highlights. Let's try. Oh, no. Oh, goodness. What have I done? Okay. Yeah, it doesn't highlight. That's okay. Oh, that one works now. Okay. Perfect. So just when you see the green line here, that amount rate where it goes down there, that's showing our current, what we have currently in our capital reserve account. And then as it goes along, it shows what we're going to be putting in over its life cycle, and that's over the 50 years. The blue line is we'll call that like almost like our bank account balance. So that's what we show cumulative, right? So it goes down at a steady rate over the next 3 to 4 years because we're moving money over into operating reserves and utilizing that for taxation. And then as you see, it kind of ebbs and flows with the amounts that we're needing and then going down. So right now, you can see that the 2031 is when those walking floor trailers come on. They show that, we're a little bit under. We kind of build that reserve back up, and then it goes down again with those replacements to scale houses and those types of items. We slowly build it back up, and then it goes down again. We have more renewal needs. So just kind of a long term. Now, where you see it go down more in the 2060 range, that's when we'd have that large amount of renewal requirements for things like the buildings and that. And after that, it keeps going down only because we don't have enough money in the reserves as more renewals come, because we basically depleted all that reserve, and then it's just a zero account, and we're using some of that money to fund our operation. So a few considerations from this are our needs are significant over the long term, mostly because we have current funding in place and new assets. But it's very manageable. We're in a good spot. This is not a bad news story at all. If anything, it's a very good news story. The ratios all look really good. Important to note, though, our deficits do grow over time. So as we see the models on our current rate, the deficit does get larger and larger as we go through. So we just want to make sure we react to that, but lots of time to do that. Our short to medium term funding is very strong. I show that funding ratio at 106% over the next 25 years. We've got cash to make sure we can manage the renewals over the short term. We just need to make sure we plan for the long term, because there is risk. And as we see in other departments, if we don't do anything now about it, we get into various issues as we get near the end of life of those assets. We're seeing that right now in utilities, assets that we didn't plan for renewals at times. And when they come up, then we really have to make sure or we have to think outside the box to fund them. So we just have to make sure we're proactive. And I think that we have a lot of opportunity to do that here. The last thing about that is just that with the infrastructure, if we don't plan the funding, we will get into a space where we may have to, either change how we operate and or close solid waste sites, just because we won't have the funding to renew those assets as they become depleted. Saying that would be worst case scenario, we might just have to change how we operate those sites as they are. So what we did from this, when we looked at all this, is we built a scenario. Important to note that the scenario that we kind of built doesn't really, it doesn't factor in the near term. So our current 5-year plan, because it's a solid plan. We have really good action. We just wanted to build something to look at after that. So in the 2031 going forward. So if we allocated an average of 3% of our revenue to capital reserves in 2031 and stuck with that over the long term, we're in a much better position than we would be if we didn't. We also want to look for revenue increases. And there's various ways that the team felt would be very manageable to increase revenue from municipal and First Nations solid waste agreements, and also recycling revenue, growing that as well. Couple things we will need to do is that $25,000 per year funding, very small amount of additional revenue we would need. But we would need that for that 2031 to 2037 range. That just helps fund some of those renewals in that 2036 time. Easy to manage. But then 2046 onward, we need about another $500,000 of revenue just to make sure that we can fund our future amounts. What that does is when we look at this graph again, that would fix this major issue here. And really, so when you think of that, when we look at it, this is with those changes, it now builds our asset portfolio, our renewal portfolio on the right track. The important thing that we took into account here is we don't want to allow capital reserves to get too big, that we have these massive capital reserve accounts. We want to make sure that they're manageable, that we're keeping our taxation and or revenue streams lower, and they kind of match when we have the renewals that we need. So as you can see, we just slowly build over the years. So from 2031, we're just slowly building our capital reserve account till we need to spend it in 2037, 2038. And then it goes back down to almost nothing, and we just slowly build it again. As you see, it kind of jumps up there in 2046, and then slowly starts to build again. That's just to make sure that we have enough money for that major amount of renewals we would have in the future. So the next steps we're going to do with this information is obviously validate and refine all our projections. A few things that I mean by that is, we want to get out, make sure we're walking fence lines, getting good measurements on railings, getting condition assessments completed for all our block walls, and that. Those will really start to change how we look at our outlooks and see where we are. Some of these things that we project might be lasting 50 years, might only end up being good for 25 years, and or the exact opposite might happen, where we have assets that we believe are only 50 years in life, but they're in really good shape. They might last longer. So we want to make sure we validate all that. We want to further develop our funding strategies, make sure that we understand, what those life cycle gaps look like, and see how we can further refine that to make sure it's matching with what our asset renewal needs. And then the main thing we really want to make sure we do is prioritize our capital planning for our near-term renewals. We want to make sure that we have, we're planning money now to replace things like those trailers in 2031, the scales in 2038. We want to make sure that we earmark that money and we're using it for that future funding, because I know it could be easy to kind of forget about those things. Then all of a sudden you go, oh, we gotta renew them now. So we want to make sure we got the money for that. And that's it, unless for me. So if there's any questions, by all means.
Thank you for that report, Asset Manager Wininski. And questions? Director Grenier.
Thank you very much for that report. I got a couple questions, but the first is this an inflation adjusted schedule that you've done, or is it just flatline?
Through the chair, the revenue projections and expenses are inflation adjusted. For asset management, we don't usually do inflation adjustments for renewal replacement costs. Main reason being is because we don't totally know what we're going to look like in 50 years for the price of steel. It's very volatile for things like steel buildings, block walls, all those things. So we use today's amounts. That's kind of what we've done as a standard.
Thank you. And I guess the second part to this, if strata corporations go through a long-term building replacement, in fact, they're required by the government to do this, and they're required to update their building envelope study every 5 years. And then it kind of, from there, they depart wildly on how they go about it. And the reason they depart from that is because not all of the owners are going to own that asset for the entire length of the time. And so you get some owners that would say, I don't want to pay for the next guy's roof. I want to pay for the part of the roof that I'm using while I'm in it. And the next guy, he can pay his share. And so if you're in a corporation, the corporation never dies and you can do this kind of planning long-term. General Electric and all the rest of it can do that planning. But here in the TNRD, if I went to my constituents and I said, by the way, I'm going to tax you another 3% every year until 2064 so that the people in 2064 can have a waste disposal site, I don't think I get reelected. So we have to come up, we have to take what is a very mathematical, logical approach that might be applicable for the organization or a corporation, and then say, now, what does that mean down to our tax-paying constituents? And so some of the things that I'm familiar with is instead of funding 99%, as your model suggests, so that by the time the asset is exhausted and we need to replace it, boom, we've got the money to replace it. Well, okay, so that new asset will last another 50 years, say. Well, if we're talking to our guys today that got another 35 or 40 years and then replacing something 50 years, they might say, well, it may be more reasonable to fund it up to, say, 30% and let the next guy kick in his share. We're all going to be very long in the tooth by 2064. So I don't know, I think we have to look at 2064, but I'm not sure we have to fund it at 3% a year every year until we get to that 99% threshold, which the math would kind of suggest. I wonder if you could just comment on those elements of it.
Yeah, of course. And through the chair, the couple of things that are important to note there. And if you wouldn't mind just pulling that graph back up. The 3% is not necessarily an increase that we would have to provide from, let's go to that. I can move from over to the next one there. Oh, yeah. Perfect. Thank you. So I'll just show quickly. The 3% is just what we want to earmark from our revenue. So the revenue model that we did showed a 2% or 2.5% inflation increase, but also 2.5% in basically operating cost increase as well over the term. The only actual increases that we'd be looking at to fund with that model that I just showed would just be these ones here. So that's the revenue increases from municipal and First Nation solid waste service agreements, which I believe we were looked at about 5 to 10% over a 5-year term, as well as that 1% recycling revenue. Those are the only increases we looked at right now, but that does show a shortage of $500,000 per year after 2046. That's the amount we'd have to look to increase. And I don't have the exact number in front of me of what I thought the budget would potentially look like in those years. But we could definitely circle back and give that amount, but it would be that would be the increase. That's the shortage that we have only, is that $500,000. But the other thing that I just wanted to mention, and I fully agree with what you're saying, because it's something that we thought about, that, hey, you know what, somebody now is not going to worry about something in 2046 or 2066. And I'll be honest, I'll probably be retired by then as well, hopefully. So I don't want to be too tied to that. But the important thing is we're looking at slowly building that. So when you see that 2046 number slowly start to go up, that's allowing those people in 2046 to slowly start to build towards that 2068 amount. But then also the 2031 to 2037, that's just a slow build to allow those amounts to share. And then it goes almost down to zero. So we kind of see where it zeroes out there. And then we slowly start to build again. Once again, the important thing to note is this is just a scenario that we thought. would look good to show you what we thought would be an optimal scenario. By all means, it's up to the committee and the board to really decide what they think is the best funding ratio, if they want to do 100% of asset renewal funding or 30%. But this way allows to kind of share that burden across multiple, we'll call it, generations, right? So we don't get into issues like we see now where in utilities where they, in the past have not had that funding in place. And now this generation stuck with trying to figure out ways to pay for things that we could have been saving for back in the 70s.
So just supplemental to that answer, your model is assuming that 100% replacement at the end. What would the model look like if we said, you know what, we're going to leave our kids 30% instead of 100%? We're not going to leave them, we're not going to build their waste treatment site for the next 50 years, but we're going to leave them a nest egg that lets them get started. And if they have to go borrow the other 70% in their generation, that's their deal. What would it look like if it was, say, at 30%, or would it be prudent in your mind to do an analysis that looks at 30% instead of 100%?
Through the chair, yeah, I think the second part's exactly right. If it came back and we wanted to present some different models of what 30%, 50%, 100% look like, it would be best to go back and look at that analysis. So without knowing the exact numbers, how that would look, it would be better just to show some different scenarios and say this is what we could do to really fund. But how it would look, it would be basically the blue line would be lower than the yellow line. And we'd be okay with that, right? That's what we would decide that, hey, we're happy with how that looks. And there's nothing wrong with that. The main thing that we want to do is just be thinking about how are we going to replace those assets in the future? And if we have the strategy that says, you know what, we're going to save for X amount because we want to make sure we keep, the revenue requirements lower right now, that's definitely something we can build as a scenario.
Any other questions for Manager Winniski? Director Blackwell.
Yeah, just a couple of questions, and thank you for the report. I mean, asset management, especially in the municipalities, is something we're all just dealing with now and learning the joy of what it's going to cost our taxpayers over the next couple of decades. So two questions. Are your reports, and this may be a little bit too far, in any way tied to regional growth numbers? So that's number one. I think that one's fairly simple. Our projections. And then the second one, the reserve build here, what part of this relies or considers interest as a way of accumulating this reserve funding? What's the growth rate you think on?
Manager Vieira.
Yeah. Sorry, just chatting there of who's going to answer the question. So, and I'll look to Mike to interrupt me if he's got a different opinion, but to the regional growth question, we're not incorporating that because we're not looking at actual tax rates here. We're looking at the total amount of money that's required. So if there's additional growth or shrinkage, additional tax revenue, that means the tax rate is lower, but it shouldn't determine the actual replacement dollars. But what maybe Director Blackwell is probably going to say next is growth will also determine what the new assets need to be in the future. So if we have significant growth, then we'll need a bigger eco depot when it needs to be replaced. So we're not considering that in the asset replacement. The asset replacement is like for like replacement. So that's what this whole system is built on. So you can go down a rabbit hole of theoreticizing all different things here. So in theory, if you have doubling the population, then you have more revenue, and then you have the ability to build a bigger facility. But this is just based on replacing the existing infrastructure that we have in place. Anything to add to that, Mike?
Yeah, that's exactly it. What we look at is the levels of service currently, and how do we replace the current levels of service. And that's kind of why I mentioned too that, if we change things that we want to, add new sites or further develop sites, then as we do that, we make sure that we have a plan to renew those assets as well. So if we say that, hey, all of a sudden we're going to look to make one eco depot bigger or add an eco depot, we'll just make sure that we have that amount earmarked to what that would cost over its renewal term. Meaning, you know, Adriana and team have pulled out a very good example of what each site costs, not only to operate, but what it costs to build. New, we can utilize that amount to build the growth in. Oh, yeah, and sorry, on the interest question, currently, and we did went back and forth about this. Currently, I have not built interest into the models only because, and we don't usually do that in asset management per se, because we don't really know what interest amounts are going to look like over that, you know, 50-year term. But what it does allow is, because these are just models, and we would further work with the finance team as we adopted them as policy, or as, you know, how we're going to look at our long-term funding scenarios. That's when we would start to equate interest in and further refine the numbers. So important when I say that a lot of this is information, you know, to start the thinking of what we are going to be doing in the future, or what we want to kind of push towards in the future. That's when we would start to, when we actually do those things, we would start to incorporate interest costs and savings in there as well. So current model does not show interest savings, but future models would adopt interest amounts in there.
Thank you for that. That was great answers on both of those.
Any other questions? I have two questions on my end, if I can finish off with that. So when we're talking about asset management and Manager Winitsky, you talked about service levels. I'm just curious, and just probably on the trailer piece and the fencing piece, if we increase the service level for the maintenance side, could we not increase the life cycle of that so it's not a replacement as soon as you placed those dates on it? Could that life cycle of those trailers and those go longer if we increase the service levels? Would that save us money?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then that's just it. If we increased our maintenance budgets, say to, you know, we're only going to, and it's important to note too, that, you know, when we think of fencing, right, trailers are one thing, but when we think of fencing, if we have a maintenance budget that says, hey, we're going to, you know, maintain our fencing and make sure we keep it in tip-top shape, you know, that'll increase that maintenance budget, and it will increase the life cycle. But there's also a thought that we wouldn't necessarily have to replace a full fence line. So, you know, a 360-degree or you know, outlook of the site. We might just say, hey, we're going to do a capital replacement of just one section of that fence, right? So that would allow that dollar to be better spent and utilize what we already have. So as we get close to the time, those budgets tend to fluctuate for sure. The important thing to note, though, is, once again, because we are talking in hypothetical world of, you know, 2063 or what have you, that we want to make sure that we're earmarking at least some money for that amount.
And in closing, I see the picture a little bit different than my director beside me. Randy, when I see the comparison between a strata and who's going to live there and if they're going to be there in the future, sitting in this chair and being a director here, I don't look at it as I'm just here temporary and I'm going to move out of here and the responsibility stops when I'm gone. I think we all represent TNRD and we want it to be successful in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years from now. And I don't want a director sitting in this chair or that chair 30 years from now saying, what were they thinking? Now we got to replace this whole building because they didn't maintain it or they didn't put money away. So I think it's on us at this, whether we're here next year or we won't be here in 50 years, I think it's still our responsibility to make sure the assets we have the funding to maintain them and have funding available to replace them when the time comes. So that board can sit here and say that board back in 2026 and the future years was helping us out, because at the end of the day, this is all our responsibility. This house will be passed on to future directors. Thank you for that report. And Javier, anything else on this? There was no action required?
No action required. As I said, we're going to continue working through these plans and presenting them to the various committees and the board, and ultimately these will be incorporated into updated asset management policies at the board level and incorporated to our budget. So to the discussion around what is the strategy in terms of 100% versus 50% planning, that'll ultimately be set by policy by the board when we integrate it into the budget for long-term planning.
Thank you for that. Any other question that we can move forward? So now we will go to 5.3, proposed changes to Sun Peak's transfer station operations. And I believe you're up again, Manager Vieira.
In name only, I'll pass that one over to Manager Mayu to present this report.
Manager made you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and Directors. All right, if we can get the presentation back up here. All right. Perfect. So the purpose of the report and presentation today is that we are proposing some significant operational changes at the Sun Peaks transfer station. The changes do represent a change to the current levels of service, which would require board approval. What we're proposing is to implement a bag limit restriction, which would remove business and strata loads from using the facility. This would improve, first of all, safety and efficiency for residents and visitors at that transfer station, and also reduce costs for both the municipality and the TNRD. And lastly, it would align the services at that site with upcoming regulatory requirements and standard practices in other areas of British Columbia. So some background on the Sun Peaks transfer station. It was constructed about 20 years ago in 2005. Its original intent was for passenger vehicles with small loads of garbage, focused on residents and visitors in the area. At the time that it was built, there were no formal commercial business or strata restrictions in place. And since the time of construction, that community has seen significant population growth, including business and strata developments in the area. And what we see today is that the site experiences high usage by businesses and strata corporations or operators that come into the site frequently with large truck and trailer loads. In reviewing some of the historical documents for the transfer station, we did locate this brochure, which was developed at the time that the site was constructed, which helps confirm the original intent of the site being focused on smaller residential loads of garbage and actually providing direction that the transfer station is not designed to accept large commercial loads. And also directed any land clearing, construction, or demolition debris to go further down the road to the Heffley Creek site, which at that time was a landfill, but is still there today as a landfill and also an eco depot. And as a quick reminder, we have kind of a two-tier system in the solid waste network. We have eco depots, which are large full-service facilities that have weigh scales, and they're designed for large commercial loads. Transfer stations are more focused on residential service, and they're typically smaller, and they don't have as much capacity for large vehicles unloading at the sites. This is an aerial overview of the Sun Peaks transfer station. You can see that it's a small site. There's 4 bins there. And I've blocked out, we've done some expansion to the recycling area. This is really a pretty quick drive-through site. Right now, there are no tipping fees that are charged to any users of the transfer station. There's an arrangement with the municipality through a memorandum of understanding that the municipality pays the TNRD for the tipping fees when those bins actually go to landfill. So it should be quick for people to just drive through and drop off their bags. However, what we see is when we have large trucks and trailers come in, they need to maneuver in this small footprint, back the truck and trailer up to the bin, and sometimes take 20 minutes to unload, which can cause congestion. And the drivable footprint here is around 400 square meters, so it's quite tight. So why are we proposing these changes now? Well, we're finding that the facility is no longer in line with the original intent. We've seen growth in business and strata waste volumes. At this time, we estimate that about 60% of the waste flowing through the transfer station is coming from business and strata corporations. This means that taxpayers are subsidizing business and strata disposal costs. And we also have upcoming regulatory changes, which is the commercial organics ban, which we talked about at the fall meeting. that's going to force some changes in the community of Sun Peaks and in the city of Kamloops. So the proposed change, like I mentioned earlier, is to introduce a bag limit at the transfer station. This is a common approach to help separate residential loads from commercial loads, and it really prioritizes residents and visitors, allowing them to come into the site, quickly unload their material, and then off they go. And the intent is to deter those large commercial loads. The goal is that we improve safety and efficiency and customer experience for residents and visitors. We're proposing a moderate threshold be introduced of up to 6 bags per day. This would allow most folks to deal with the waste that they're generating on a regular basis. That's a pretty generous threshold. You'll typically see this range from all the way down to 2 bags per week up to 10. So this is a nice middle ground. The thought is that we also would pair this with conditions, including that it would be private passenger vehicles only and no trailers, because the trailers are really causing some congestion issues at the facility. So what would the alternative options be for businesses in Strata Corporation and Sun Peaks? There's 2 options. The first would be to self-haul to the Heffley Creek Eco Depot, which is about 25 minutes down Heffley-Lewis Creek Road. The site is designed for commercial traffic. It has weigh scales in place and follows the direct user pay model, which is in place across the TNRD, and it has a full suite of diversion opportunities. The second option would be for those businesses to hire private commercial waste collection service. This would be a business-to-business service delivery model where they could sign up and have a contract for garbage recycling and compost collection services. So a collector would provide carts or bins and then come to service those carts and bins with a collection truck, similar to what you see in the picture there. And this is standard practice in most BC municipalities and resort communities. So just for some scale, I've included some aerial photographs of the Heffley Creek Eco Depot. This is a regional facility that was built in 2012, 2013, and its intent is to service large commercial loads and also residential traffic. It has large turnaround areas on both sides. So there's the free recycling side, and then there's the pay waste side. And each of those turnaround areas is around 1,800 square meters. So you could fit about 4.5 transfer stations into each side of this facility, just to give some scale on how much larger it is. It has 2 80-foot scales dedicated for inbound, outbound traffic, and this is the highest level of service that we provide in the solid waste network. The other comparable site is the Thompson-Nicola Eco Depot, and both sites have a back-end landfill where we're burying waste as well. Showing some different views from around the site. So it's quite large and expansive, lots of room for driving and maneuvering. And then again, comparison to the Sun Peak site. And you can probably imagine how tight this gets. This is also one of our busiest sites, the Sun Peak site, for residential recycling. I'm sorry, does this have the little... No, it doesn't. Okay. The metal roofs that you see to the north, those are the recycling huts. So what ends up happening at this location is residents drive in from the bottom. You'll get a bunch of cars that are queued up to use the waste drop-off bins. And then they'll either go and do their recycling at after their garbage, or you'll get folks that are just coming there for recycling. So you get quite a lot of congestion in this small area. So far on the engagement side, this is the first time that you folks are hearing about this, but because these are significant changes for the community, on February 3rd, we met with the Sun Peaks Sun Peaks municipality and did a presentation at their committee of the whole meeting where we discussed these proposed changes and wanted to hear their thoughts and answer questions before decisions are made. There were concerns that were raised at the meeting with limited storage in the community for waste and recycling. They're a bear-aware community, so of course concerns came up about bears and how this could impact their wild safe status. There was some concerns about self-hauling to Heffley Creek and safety on Heffley-Lewis Creek Road, especially during the wintertime. And also, what would the cost be to businesses in Strata for having commercial collection services? Following that meeting, we held site visits with the property management companies and the resort to get a better understanding of what their current waste storage systems looked like. We're going to touch on this when Emily presents a little bit later, and you'll see some photos and get some more details. But typically what you see is down in a parkade, there'll be a dedicated parking space or two for a trailer. Those trailers are filled with garbage by building users, which would be a combination of restaurants, businesses, private living accommodations. They fill the trailer, and sometimes once a day or more often, that trailer is hauled by the maintenance person down to the transfer station for unloading. Some of the waste storage is outside in sheds. So yeah, definitely a concern with the current system, but after having those site visits, we engaged with 8 waste haulers to gauge what their interest would be in providing commercial collection in Sun Peaks. Good news is that there was general interest in that as a business opportunity, and many of them have creative solutions for being able to service small areas and move waste and recyclables in and out of parkades and tight spaces. And as a quick reminder here is that we did chat about a draft implementation plan for a commercial organics disposal ban at the fall meeting, which was approved in principle. And this would apply to food scraps and compostable materials being generated both in the community of Sun Peaks and in the city of Kamloops. And the intent here is we'd be targeting the high volume food processors. So this would be restaurants, grocery stores, food-related businesses. Right now, the TNRD is not processing organics. There's now private composting facility right in Kamloops that's ready to receive material, and the private haulers are interested in this as a business opportunity. Right now, and we'll highlight this a little bit more later, is we're undergoing education with the intent that enforcement on this ban would begin in late 2027. And so these changes together are really working they're intentionally coordinated because they're happening in parallel. And the main driver here is that we're encouraging source separation at the business and strata level. The changes both reinforce a contracted service collection model. We find that this has been working in other places like Whistler, where it's larger, spaces are tighter, and they've been doing this for a number of years. And overall, it'll improve our diversion and help us reach our long-term sustainability goals. On the financial implication side, as I mentioned earlier, the municipality of Sun Peaks currently pays the TNRD for the waste disposal costs. We estimate that around $27,000 is actually from commercial waste that the municipality is currently paying for. So shifting to this proposed change would save the municipality $27,000. The businesses would be paying for the cost of disposal. And on the TNRD side, we estimate that the savings that we would see in hauling would be just under $38,000. So this would reduce regional costs, which are shared by all taxpayers except for the city of Kamloops, of course, and the Regional Solid Waste Service, and would move those disposal costs to the commercial generators. So what we're suggesting is that because this change is, as I said, significant, it would require an amendment to the levels of service that we currently have in place. We adopted the levels of service framework back in 2023 ahead of procuring our new contracts for solid waste operations maintenance services. And the levels of service, they were included as an attachment, but what they do is they help set our standards for the service that we're delivering. It includes hours of operation, site attendance, types of waste that are collected, as well as safety, capacity, overall costs, and customer satisfaction. And so this change would require an amendment to the levels of service document that we currently have in place. So the timeline is that we're proposing is we have already met with the municipality to give notice and get their feedback. That was in February of this year. We're now here at the Solid Waste Committee for your feedback and a decision, which would require, if you'd like to move forward, that we bring the levels of service document to the board in May, which would allow us to do communication and outreach to the community from May until November. This would allow time for businesses to put collection contracts in place, get bins delivered, carts delivered, that sort of thing, and proposing that this go into effect at the start of the winter 2026 ski season, which would be December 1st. With that, though, we're open to feedback on this timeline, and that can be part of the discussion. So to wrap up here, at the recommendation, the only direction that we're looking for at this time is whether or not the committee supports the proposed change to the levels of service in Sun Peaks to implement the bag limit, which will effectively ban business and strata from using the transfer station. We are at this point, the decision isn't whether or not we would be running a commercial collection service. This would be a business-to-business relationship. So that's not the decision to discuss today. It's whether or not you're in support of amending the levels of service that we're proposing. And with that, I'm happy to open it up to questions and discussion.
Thank you, Manager Madu. Thank you for that clarification at the end, because I think that was some of the thoughts that were going around the table. I see Director Houghton.
Did we not recently put a compactor in at Sun Peaks for the garbage?
Through the chair, yes, we did install compactors in 2025 to help increase hauling efficiency at that location because the volume of waste is so high.
Director Gagne.
Thank you, Chair. And boy, thanks for that comprehensive report. You know, one of the things you showed up, there was a slide of the transfer facility, but in the wintertime, it's even more congested. And so moving things around, trailers and all the rest of it is a real challenge. I'm wondering what the feedback was from the property management companies that you spoke to. And I raise that because the buildings that are built up there, they are built and they are structured to accommodate sort of a trailer somewhere that collects all the garbage from the transient people that are renting the units. And then that trailer ends up going somewhere to dump that waste. And it changes during the week. If it's the winter time, then there's a lot more people, a lot more waste. It's the summer, it's less. And they basically do it on the basis of when the trailer gets filled. So I'm just wondering what the feedback was from the strata managers. Did you get a consensus on any of this or some suggestions?
Thank you, through the chair. This is a major change for the community, so there were definitely concerns about how would we do this, how is it going to work? When they're thinking about self-hauling to the Heffley Creek site, they did raise concerns about the safety of the road in the wintertime, that sometimes they're using seasonal staff, so they're thinking about training, driver safety, and had some concerns around the self-hauling piece. And then secondary to that, when they're thinking about a commercial waste collection service, the main concern is how much will it cost? And then secondary to that is the space constrictions. However, what we see in Whistler is that people came up with some pretty creative solutions to those problems. Some buildings would actually share waste rooms where they would do garbage in one side, recycling in the other, and come up with some creative solutions there. And there's also a variety of different carts and bins and wheel systems and ways to move those carts and bins out of the parkades to service them. And so I think being able to answer some of the concerns they have about how it could work, those are the answers that we're trying to get for them with those waste hauler meetings. And there are solutions out there that we're happy to share with them pretty shortly. We haven't gotten to that stage yet, though.
And if I could just add one thing to that, our response typically is around those concerns around where are we going to store the garbage. We have this spot dedicated where the trailer is now. Nothing we're proposing should increase or decrease the amount of waste that's generated from the facility. So what the businesses and Stratus need to do is store it differently, perhaps. So using the trailer example, the trailer's not there anymore. Maybe there's room for 2 or 3 like dumpster style front load bins on wheels. That's typically what we see in the places like Whistler that we looked at, where those then bins get rolled out for collection instead of it being hooked up to a truck and trailer. So the overall waste doesn't change. It's just how you store it and how it gets serviced is ultimately, to be blunt, what we're putting on the solution to that. We're going to provide some guidance, but the solution to that is up to each business and commercial entity to figure out what solution works best in their scenario. And that would be working between them and whoever they decide to hire for collection. Or, as Adriana said, the option could be do the same thing. If they want to keep doing exactly what they're doing, that's fine. They just need to haul it that extra 20 minutes down the road to the facility that's designed for it.
Supplemental?
So thank you for that. And yep, I'm sure there's many other solutions that they can come to, but I am concerned that we don't want to just drop it on them. I think we need a little bit more. You've heard us before, here's what we suggest, and here's some alternatives you might not have thought about. What about the possibility of dedicating a drop off? And I'm thinking about the strata corporations. They're basically their residential waste. Those people aren't individually going to drop it off. So the corporation's now trying to be efficient. What if we were to dedicate a day or a time of that transfer station solely for those strata corporations and trailers? Would that help ease the congestion and minimize the longer haul that might otherwise come up?
Fair question. My professional opinion is no, that would be very complicated to set up, because then we're trying to then tell the residents not to go on a certain day and have the strata and commercials to go on a certain day. It's something that could be considered, but that we wouldn't recommend. And really, it goes back to Ms. May's earlier part of the presentation, where we have a facility that's designed just for this, within a reasonable distance. And so what we want to do at the end of the day, I guess, to try summarize this, the whole presentation, is provide better service to the individual self-haulers that the site's designed for at Sun Peaks, and redirect the commercial stuff to the site that the commercial stuff is designed for. And so what maybe we didn't make super clear in this presentation is when we looked at a number of models, but we really spent time, Adriana's staff spent time looking and actually touring the Whistler facilities. They have exactly that. They have a residential transfer station right very close within the village of Sun Peaks that is solely for individual users. And then the transfer station commercial ones is a 15-minute drive down the highway. So that's the model we're going for.
Director Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the recommendation.
Moved by Director Smith, second by Director Onslow. Any other discussions? Director Grenier?
Just wondering, is Sun Peaks at a stage where curbside collection might be considered? And would that take some pressure off this drop off?
Yes, through the chair. Yes, curbside collection. I'm assuming you mean like residential curbside collection?
Like Blue River and Tobiano and Area J.
Yeah. So if in theory residential curbside collection was in place there, it would absolutely take the pressure off the transfer station. Ultimately, there wouldn't be a need for it. However, what we've found in most and municipal resort communities, they don't want that type of service because you're there for 3 days, for example, if it's a residential property, you're not always there during garbage day and who's going to put out the garbage. Further to that, residential collections within municipalities is a service that the municipality can choose to offer. So I could say, I think with confidence, that the municipality is not at this time considering implementing any sort of residential garbage collection. And we as the TNRD wouldn't do that within municipal boundaries.
Thank you. Before we take the vote, I just have one question, and it's probably just an opinion. When we go back to talk to the strata and the businesses and the municipality, management, when you said, the business are going to be creative and maybe work together, I'm just thinking out loud, they start putting a large bin with wheels on it in place of the municipalities not allowing, or you may have the Sun Peaks Fire Department involved as well. Is that a conversation that we should wholesomely have with everybody that's involved? Because at the end of the day, if one authority is involved and does not allow that creativity, then we're back at, we don't know what they're going to do with their garbage if they're already tight with space, and now we're putting extra constraints on them. Just wondering, that next conversation, will it be with the municipality and the business owners and Sun Peaks Fire Department?
To the chair, absolutely. That's a great point. We should absolutely have those conversations with the municipality to make sure that we're following all of their community bylaws and that we're working together towards the solution.
Thank you.
And I can just add to that, Chair, that the municipality is, and part of the reason we presented to this information to them already is to get them thinking about it and for their council to be aware, but also from a staff perspective, have acknowledged that, in their planning processes and building requirements, they haven't properly planned for this kind of infrastructure, which I know Director Grenier was commenting from the strata he's familiar with. And that's something that needs to be integrated. And I know all municipalities over the past few decades have gone through that, understanding that they now need to plan for more different types of collection space for when they're considering approving new buildings.
Thank you for that. Director Houghton, to close?
Just one question. If the commercial guys come in and take that garbage, like presently Heffley Creek has a landfill, correct? You're saying to take the garbage there. I can see if it gets into the hands of a commercial operator, Super Save or the other boys, that they'd probably keep right on going and go and discharge it at the Kamloops Indian Band landfill, and would be out some tipping fees. I don't know if that's been brought into consideration or not.
A very good point. And yes, it has been brought into consideration. And in this situation, the complicating factor with tipping fees is that depending on where the material is brought to determines whether we're actually making money or losing money. So it's actually a cost savings if waste gets hauled directly from Sun Peaks by a commercial hauler and goes straight to the Grasslands Organics landfill. In theory, if that were to happen, which I think you're correct, that's probably the most likely scenario, and we don't even touch it. At the end of the day, even though we don't get the disposal fees, our operating costs that we're saving outweighs that.
With that, the motion's on the floor. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
That is carried. And with that, we're at 5.4, organics update.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so we wanted to just give a quick update to you folks on the organics disposal ban and the work that we've done so far since we talked about this last October. So quick reminder on what this ban is. So it would prohibit the landfilling of designated organic materials from commercial haulers in landfill. It would require that material be source separated and directed to a composting facility. The mechanism that we would use for this is to add food waste as a new category under our existing mandatory recyclable materials ban, which has been in place since 2022. So this uses our existing framework and enforcement methods. As we've done for previous materials in the past, this approach emphasizes education, collaboration, and a phased rollout to allow lots of time for adjustments. And the quick background is that in our regional solid waste management plan, we are targeting that 500 kilograms per person of waste disposal by 2028. So again, all the initiatives that we undertake are to help us get towards that goal. And this is something that has been is outlined as a key strategy in the plan. It identifies the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector as the largest source of organic waste in the region and recommends putting a disposal ban in place once we have processing capacity available, which it now is. In Kamloops, we see that we've got 68% of our regional population centered here and is a major source of that commercial food activity. And then in Sun Peaks, of course, it's got high seasonal tourism, lots of restaurants, and food waste coming out of that community. So at this point, I'm going to introduce Emily Branch. She's our Environmental Services Coordinator, and she has been working on this initiative. So she's going to give an update for you on the work that we've undertaken so far. So over to you, Emily.
Thank you. So today I'm looking forward to providing you folks with our an update on our organics disposal ban proposal. So starting out with our proposed rollout timeline that was shared at the Regional Solid Waste Management Committee that happened in October, you can see that this is divided into 4 distinct phases, with phase 1, where we're currently sitting, being planning and stakeholder consultation that concludes at the end of this April. We'll then be moving into phase 2 of stakeholder engagement and data collection spanning from May to October 2026. And I do want to note that phase 1 and phase 2 work together to create the foundations of education and outreach that we see in phase 3, and then implementation and enforcement in phase 4 that we see there. So we're going to take all this information that we gathered, and some of the activities outlined in phase 2 have been undertaken in phase 1 to support a more fulsome engagement and build, again, that foundation so we can really dive into that engagement as we move forward. So diving a little bit more specifically into phase 1 of planning and consultation, the goal of this phase is to engage with haulers, food waste generators, composting facilities, and this all serves to co-develop that disposal ban framework. So I'm going to start by giving an overview of the engagement activities that we've undertaken, and then I'll dive into those a little bit more specifically for you folks. So for information compilation, we started by building a comprehensive database of food waste generators and haulers, so this can further support our consultation and engagement in phase 2. And then from here, our engagement activities included participating at the Sun Peaks Committee of the Whole meeting to provide that initial notification, also undertaking those Sun Peaks meetings with the resort, as well as property management companies, hauler meetings, and then we also have some more meetings upcoming on the tail end of phase 1 that include our planned monitoring technical working group on April 20th, and then we're also meeting with the City of Kamloops on April 21st, which I'll dive into all of this a little bit deeper for you folks. So looking specifically at the Sun Peaks Committee of the Whole meeting that happened in early February, reiterating some of the key findings that Adriana shared, we definitely heard that there were concerns with limited storage capacity, bears and wildlife attractants as a result of organic waste, the safety impacts of hauling material down Heffley Lewis Creek Road to that Heffley Creek Eco Depot, as well as the costs associated with private collection. And so after that, we moved into our targeted meetings in Sun Peaks in early March, starting with the Sun Peaks Resort. So this was a really great opportunity to see all the properties that they have in Sun Peaks and understand their waste systems that they operate for those facilities. So we got to tour these locations, and there they have 3 40-yard garbage compactors that specifically belong to Sun Peaks, or that they contract out and utilize for their operations. And in those garbage compactors, they shared that 50% of the material within them was organic waste. And so this is in line with our findings from our 2024 waste composition study that found compostable organics make up 44% of waste to landfill in the TNRD. Additionally, they shared that organics fees to manage this waste stream is about 1/3 of the total cost for their waste collection. And they have this data because they've already started a pilot with one of the haulers that we've engaged with to collect this organic material. So currently the pilot includes the Sun Peaks Grand Hotel, Mantle's Restaurant, Morrissey's, and any sort of in-room dining that's happening in that hotel. And they're seeking to expand that pilot as well to include the Village Day Lodge, Massa's, and the Annex. So they've already got that and they're gathering data. So we'll be looking forward to seeing how that pilot continues to progress. Looking at our meetings with the property management companies in Sun Peaks, this was also another really great opportunity for staff to get a better understanding of how this waste is being managed. And I feel it's important to note that the structure for managing hotels in Sun Peaks can sometimes be interesting because instead of a normal hotel operations structure, they sometimes utilize these property management companies. Some of these are vacation rentals as well as hotel units. And then they also shared what they called the Sun Peaks formula. So this is that there are hotel buildings in the commercial core of Sun Peaks. And then in these buildings, they are typically featuring a restaurant, ski shops, cafe, and offices. So we have a variety of different commercial sources feeding into one localized waste room. So on the right-hand side there, you'll see a picture of some of those utility trailers that property managers are currently using to self-haul material to the Sun Peaks transfer station. And while we were able to explore these waste areas, we found that currently their storage is nearing its capacity. We were there early on in the afternoon, and one of the waste trailers that was empty that morning. It was already full by around 11 a.m. and other businesses in that same building were not even able to deposit their material in it. So we see that this is an issue with capacity and that there is definitely opportunity to improve the efficiency of managing this material, potentially through business-to-business servicing models, allowing for the proper frequency of servicing needed to get this material where it needs to be. And what we were also able to identify that where these trailers are currently stored would be a suitable location for bins or carts and other methods to store that waste until it's being serviced at a regular interval. Currently, these haulers that are being utilized are typically being brought to the site once per day in the mornings there. So they are hauling quite frequently. So it'll be interesting to see how commercial haulers could assist in this. And that leads us into our waste hauler meetings that we conducted from late March to early April. So we had individual meetings with 8 different haulers, and these meetings intended to notify haulers of these anticipated changes, gauge their interest in providing a commercial organics collection service, address any of their initial questions, as well as identifying any information needs that they have in order to be able to effectively plan for these changes. And some of our key findings that we had was there's certainly a general interest in the commercial service opportunity in Sun Peaks amongst the hauling community. As Adriana mentioned, there's a number of creative solutions to collect organics in space-restricted areas like parkades. And then it was echoed across the hauler group, as well as the property managers and Sun Peaks Resort, that they appreciated the opportunity for early notification and inclusion and having the TNRD come up and observe their waste rooms. So that was great feedback for us to hear as well. As we move forward to the tail end of phase 1, I mentioned earlier we're going to be having a meeting with the City of Kamloops to engage with them on April 21st, where we'll dive into this proposed disposal ban a little bit deeper. And we're going to be building on lessons that we learned from our engagement in Sun Peaks to help inform the engagement that we undertake in the City of Kamloops with affected stakeholders. And we anticipate that any of the received input that we get from the city will help refine our engagement and consultation approach that we have to include surveys that will be undertaken with businesses and residents, so that we expect that to be in multiple formats online as well as available in paper copies at our solid waste facilities. There will also be public meetings, potentially in person and virtual, an online comment forum similar to the City of Kamloops Let's Talk forum, press releases, as well as public information materials available at our solid waste facilities. And then looking ahead as we're transitioning into the beginning of phase 2, that's taking place starting May, we're going to continue along with the consultation and engagement that we're already doing. So we are going to circulate those surveys with commercial businesses as well as residents. We're going to continue to engage with large and medium-sized food waste generators, and we're going to continue to maintain and further develop the food waste generator database that we've already accomplished. As well, we are seeking to finalize some bylaw mechanisms. So we're looking forward to bringing that to the the Plan Monitoring Technical Advisory Committee on April 20th coming up here. And that will serve to help us finalize some of our definitions for our effective waste types, solidify some of those enforcement mechanisms like tolerance thresholds and surcharges, as well as identifying exemptions, develop an appeal process, and supporting program requirements. So we'll use that meeting as an opportunity to tease these things out and then work on getting something more set in stone as we move forward. And then finally, as we move into phase 3 down the road of education and outreach, we're going to be doing activities to prepare for that, such as getting our key messaging for outreach together and then updating the TNRD website with any sort of relevant content that we need on there. So with that brings us into phase 2, and we'll look forward to providing another update to you folks at the next Solid Waste Committee meeting as we get ready to move into phase 3. And at that point, I'll be happy to take any questions for you guys now.
Thank you for that great presentation. Questions? Director Grenier?
Thank you for the presentation. The municipality at Sun Peaks, do they have a dedicated waste person on their staff at all?
Through the chair, I do not believe that they do, no, because they're not running any solid waste functions currently.
The supplemental. The picture you showed the two garbage trailers in the basement of a strata corporation. Part of the issue for those strata buildings is that those trailers have to then be hauled up a ramp in some cases. I know at least one building where it has to go up a ramp. And then in the wintertime, there's the traction issue of the ramp. Okay, so the ramp is heated, but there's also the height of the garage door and the fixed height limitations of the basement. So these are all adding to constraints. An individual can't push that cart up the ramp as a human being. It needs a vehicle that has to maneuver down there. And in one case, the garbage room is right beside the ramp. So if you've got people trying to come in and out of the underground garage at the same time as you're trying to deal with this. And I'm just wondering if Sun Peaks would be best served by helping us by appointing somebody within their jurisdiction, volunteer or paid person, to try to come up with some of these solutions rather than us. We have a problem accepting their garbage, and we may not be having all the solutions, but as you point out, there's probably solutions out there that somebody there could take responsibility for. And I wonder if Mayor O'Toole would consider, either on a volunteer basis or on a paid basis, hiring somebody, a counterpart to you, that would help through this process.
Through the chair, first I can share that when we had those hauler meetings, we heard about a lot of different solutions for parkade issues and ramps and tight spaces. Several of them have hitch and tow systems that they use to help bring the carts out. Others have fork systems where they can connect onto the bins or the carts and actually just move them out of the parkade to be able to tip them overhead. So these are challenges that some of the haulers are already very experienced in having solutions for. And removing the human element is very important because trying to move bins and carts up ramps can definitely cause injuries and things. So there are several mechanical solutions to that already. In terms of answering like a dedicated staff person on Sun Peaks, I think in our engagement with Sun Peaks, we work through what some of the feedback is that we've learned. But I feel like from what we've learned so far, the business community already has the solutions that I think we're looking for in Sun Peaks.
Any other questions? I would just like to close. I know you talked about that engagement piece moving forward, and being a counselor with the city for the last 2 terms, you can never do enough engagement. There's always going to be somebody who said they didn't know where this come from. And I'm just wondering, I'm not sure how Sun Peaks does it, or TNRD. Is there any utility statements that we send out to all the homeowners that we could put an insert in to show where else they can engage or what's going forward in the timely manner that we're engaging?
Yeah, through the chair, I mean, we don't send out direct utility statements or anything like that to Sun Peaks, but we can work with the municipality on that. I think the benefit that we have here is that the impact to the kind of commercial and strata sector, you know, we can count it. There's like we're talking about 25-ish locations that are going to be impacted like this. So engaging with them directly is realistic. And so that's going to be the main focus of it. But I absolutely echo your comment. Someone always say I wasn't ready or didn't know. And
Thank you. And seeing no further questions, we'll move on, and thank you for that report. 5.5 on the solid waste recycling, Supervisor Trenick. Did I pronounce that right?
Close enough. Well, thank you. I don't do presentations very often, so I will talk super fast, but I'll try to slow down. I'm going to present to you a couple of super exciting things, and I'm sure you'll all be engaged. It's an operations update on our landfill water monitoring, all 6 of them, as well as some after hours visitor kind of data that you get to, I'll just kind of present to you. So if you can go to the next, well, I guess it's up to me. I don't have anybody do that for me. There we go. Hey, so landfill annual monitoring reports. The annual reports are completed and submitted to the BC Ministry of Environment and Parks for 6 TNRD landfills. 4 closed landfills, which is the Barrier, Chase, Clearwater, and Logan Lake, where we only do water monitoring reports. And the 2 active landfills, which is Heffley Creek and Lower Nicola, which we do water monitoring and an operational report. In 2025, landfill engineering and water monitoring contracts were combined. Trace Associates was a successful firm and signed into a 5-year contract with us. Ground and surface water monitoring was reduced to biannual, spring and fall, from previously quarterly monitoring as in past years. And this, when their hydrogeologists reviewed all our reports, it was in line with the previous engineers firm's recommendations. So it's a good thing. So it saves us a little bit of money. So the water quality overview at the closed landfills, Barrier landfill, which is probably dumping in there prior to 73, but it was originally permitted in 1973 and was closed in 2012, and it's been monitored since 1998. Overall, in 2025, monitoring results were consistent with historical findings, and the identified exceedances largely reflect background conditions rather than landfill-derived effects. The exceedances were sulfide, dissolved arsenic, lithium, uranium, strontium, and cobalt, and occurred at both upgradient and downgradient wells, which were consistent with previous years. And the recommendation, of course, is to continue monitoring and sampling. The Chase landfill, again, 1974, it was permitted, closed in 2012, and was monitored since 1998 as well. Most inorganic and routine parameters met standards and were consistent with historical results. Trend analysis results for 2025 generally showed no significant developing changes in groundwater or surface water quality. However, it is noted that a potential increasing trend of dissolved cadmium was identified along with some other mobile parameters in shallow groundwater, which may be a result of landfill activity. Continued monitoring is recommended to assess parameters to confirm an upward trend. Everybody excited for hearing this? I bet, eh? Water molecule, so Clearwater landfill, closed in 2012, again, monitored since 1998. It was noted that 1 well was severely damaged and is recommended to be replaced and drilled and installed. So there'll be a bit of a cost, but it's an operational thing. All monitored and reported parameters were less than the applied standards, and trend analysis Over the past 5 years, the data identified no increasing trends. Logan Lake landfill, monitored since 2006. It was closed in 2000, so a little later to be monitored. Trend analysis results indicate stable groundwater quality conditions with some parameters exhibiting mixed trends with no clear pattern, with concentrations generally consistent with 2023 and 2024 results. Additional sampling and continued monitoring is recommended to confirm possible trends to support long-term assessment of groundwater quality. Now with our active landfills, we've got Heffley Creek and Lower Nicola. Heffley Creek, several parameters exceeded the contaminated site regulations, drinking water standards, which is sulfate, sulfide, cobalt, lithium, nickel, and strontium and uranium. An upgrading well showed highest sulfate, lithium, and strontium and uranium, which would be naturally occurring. Down gradient wells exceeded standards for sulfide, cobalt, nickel, which is likely influenced by landfill activity. The trend analysis, groundwater conditions largely stable compared to 23 and 24, increasing trends identified for cobalt and nickel at a downgradient well. Overall, groundwater quality remains stable with some localized downgradient impacts potentially linked to landfill leachate. Additional sampling is recommended to confirm emerging metal trends. Lower Nicola, most parameters met the BC regulatory standards. 3 parameters exceeded standards in both upgradient and downgradient wells, which is consistent with 2024 and it was likely naturally occurring. Trend analysis, groundwater conditions are predominantly stable. Only one significant trend was increasing sulfide at one well. All other parameters showed no meaningful trends. Overall interpretation, groundwater quality remains stable and is consistent with historical conditions. Some impacts are attributed to landfill operations, particularly with dissolved lithium, low-level petroleum hydrocarbons, as well as volatile organic compounds. So again, in order to continue monitoring to track long-term stability. Okay. That's it for the landfill stuff. This is the fun one. Everybody's so
Can I
excited.
interrupt there?
Sure.
So just to jump in on that, we were joking yesterday in preparing for this, so this is, you know, the data on water quality is the most exciting part of the presentation probably, or maybe it's not. So, but the reason we're bringing this to you is, first of all, to understand that we are doing this on an annual, regular basis to ensure or to monitor, are we impacting the environment from these, many of them closed landfills that we used to operate, that we're responsible for, and the ones that we currently do operate. The other reason we're bringing it forward to you is that we think it's important that the board and the committee is just aware that this is an ongoing liability, an outstanding risk to the TNRD, that we are required to make sure we're not polluting the environment. And if we do, then and if we're sure we do, then we may need to put in mitigating measures that cost money to do so. So that's why, even though this may be boring to hear some of these stats sometimes, we think it's important to keep the board aware of where we're looking. So we've highlighted a few things where we're saying it may be impacting the water quality, and further monitoring is required. So we're going to continue to do that, but at some point we may be coming forward to the board saying, look, we're in an unfortunate situation here, is that we now need to mitigate this potential pollution and cost associated with that. Good news is we're not there now, and things are looking good, but we're going to continue to do this work year after year.
Just on that, go ahead.
I was just wondering, how long is our obligation in light of no result, like no negative result?
Well, it continually changes. At one time, when I first started this business back in 2000, it was 25 years. Now I believe it's 50 or 100. So it's just, I would recommend to a board in municipalities, it's a forever thing. You're always going to be held liable for that. It's your waste.
And to add to that, yeah, the reason we looked at each other and kind of laughed is, yeah, at one time the provincial regulation was very cut and dry. It's 25 years and then you're off. And then they came in with some regulation that essentially said forever. And then all the accountants are thinking, I'm going to look behind me, the accountants. So how do you account for forever responsibility? And so from planning purposes, we moved it to that 50-year horizon. But we just assume it's an ongoing thing from an operational perspective that we're going to continue to monitor.
Director Ansel?
Thank you. I'm just curious, do we have a fund or anything if we actually do become liable for any of these? Do we have money that's being put aside to fix it?
Go ahead.
Yes, sort of, I'll say. The cost associated with this work that we're doing is landfill closure funds that we're drawing on, that we're contributing to fund this work. And we're continuing to also contribute to closure funds and post-closure monitoring at our active landfills. Is there enough money there to account for significant work that we may need to do? No. I mean, it's designed around having to do this monitoring, but it's not, that fund is not designed for any specific scenario of having to do water treatment and whatnot. So there is some money there, but not knowing it, depending on the degree of what's required, whether it's adequate or not.
I just have two questions. Do we have to, is the province requiring us to share any of this information? Is it yearly we have to submit something, or is this just for our information only to keep tabs on it and have one more supplement?
Yeah, these reports we submit to the Ministry of Environment annually as part of our reporting process.
And my supplemental would be, if I'm hearing correctly, any landfills that we've closed would basically not be able, it'd have no value to it because we would not be able to develop or sell it. So we're just sitting on land that is actually zero value.
More or less. Most of these closed landfills, actually, all of them are not land that we even own. They were actually Crown tenure, that we have a permit to operate a landfill on.
Thank you.
I guess a little bit of aside, since we're going on a tangent talking about this. This goes all the way back to 2008 and the solid waste plan at that time, which for those who may remember who were around the board, this board made the tough decision to actually make a significant change in our solid waste system that closed a lot of the landfills and replaced them with eco depots. So Clearwater, Barrier, Chase, Logan Lake, all these ones you see listed, that all happened in the mid 2000s as part of that board direction, do that major shift. And one of the main reason for that was looking at this ongoing liability. So yes, the cost of operating a landfill, you can look at the cost of day to day, but you also look at the long term. As you add more garbage to the ground, you add more environmental hazard and risk that you ultimately be responsible for. So the decision was, let's consolidate that risk into a few regional landfills and stop polluting these smaller places and just replace them with transfer stations where we can move that pollution, for lack of a better word, to a central location that can be better managed.
Good plan. Director Ansel?
Thank you. Just one question. I know that Blue River used to have a landfill, but I don't see that we were monitoring that one. Are we responsible for that, or who ultimately is?
Yes, we're responsible for that one. We don't have that on our groundwater monitoring, partially because there is no fund there that was ever established to do the work. We do inspections of the site and look for any incidents and would have to do further work if there was any evidence.
With that, you can continue, Manager Trunett.
Thank you. After hours reported incidents. So across the region, after hours intrusions and gate dumping continue to be an issue at several solid waste facilities, with activity levels varying from year to year. A number of sites such as Aspen Grove, Blue River, Brookmere, Egan Lake, Little Fort, Loon Lake, Lytton, St. Spencer's Bridge, Tranquil Valley, Vavenby, and Westwold reported no significant activity over a 4-year period. Now, this means that we haven't received any incident reports. Not saying that nothing's happened to them, but according to with the data that we currently have, fingers crossed, nothing's happening at those sites as regular operations, which is good. High-risk locations, 70 Mile Eco Depot. This one last year had 13 after-hours visitors. It continues to experience severe break-ins and vandalism, including a theft of a contractor's skid steer in late 2025. And recently, as of this past weekend, we had damage to the site, to the office, and like fencing is a regular thing. Savino Transfer Station, although it shows to be not that much in the previous years, but this year already I had six experiences where there's high activity with repeated after-hours thefts, mostly lead-acid batteries, and major incidents such as a stolen solar panels, which happened in 2023 and again recently in 2026. Contractor now just has recently reported to us that they'll go check in the morning on their way by, look like there's some activity when like on a closed day. They'll come back and they'll see that people have been in there and changed and moved things around. So it's regularly hit. It's actually a quite bad site for after hours visitors. Lewis Creek sees reoccurring messes from intruders targeting mainly the donation bins and metal piles, though they keep the damage usually minimal, which is good. Sites with live patrol monitoring show clear benefits. Boston Flats, Heffley Creek, and South Thompson report minimal disruptions, with intruders typically scared off before causing damage. See South Thompson last year, it was someone came to the site 15 times. But with live patrol, they'll send us a report, then they'll use a talk down where they'll tell the intruder to please leave the site, you're trespassing. And then we get videos of them and they just run off. But so they really minimize the amount of disruption compared to the way it used to be when they would rampage everything, wreck stuff, and it was just horrible. So, even though South Thompson's hit lots, probably because of, it's closer to a bigger area, more population, it's just not, the live patrol is worth the money there. Some other sites experienced notable but less frequent incidents. Clinton, it had some theft issues, which another skid steer was stolen back in 2025. Two skid steers were stolen in quite a small period of time. I think it was late October last year. Paul Lake Transfer Station shows moderate levels of after hours visits, with activity decreasing this year so far. We did do some improvements on the accessibility of the site, so maybe it's just a seasonal thing too. Last year, the reason these numbers look good in 2025 and are kind of building in 2026, because we're really working with the contractors to please report this type of activity. Sun Peaks Transfer Station, they are really good with the after hours dumping, but gate dumping they're reporting to us regularly, which 4 times it's not uncommon, but they're one of the sites that actually are sending us regular reports. Overall, the data shows a small number of high impact sites driving most of the security current concerns, while many locations remain quiet. Sites with active camera monitoring generally experience fewer successful intrusions and less damages. And I was kind of alluding to during the little talk here, challenges are getting the contractor or tenants to support in promoting the importance of reporting the after hours visits and gate dumping. Unfortunately, staff sometimes become complacent and they accept illegal activities as part of the job. So we're truly trying to work with the contractors to please report this information. So this data, we can have this data so that we can report to you. Or back to what Mike, the whole fencing and stuff like that. What do we need to do to maybe try to minimize it? Is there anything we can do? Don't know, but without the data, we will never know if it's really a problem. And so that's kind of just wanted to show that to the board or the committee here, just so that you get aware of kind of what the tenants are going through on a daily basis. Gate dumping, we feel there's very little gate dumping at all reported. We know that, if the bag's left, they just bring it inside, no big deal. But we want to know about it, so we're working with contractors so that they report that stuff to us, so that we can see if there's certain areas that are worse than others, and that data could be helpful even with hours of operation and stuff like that in the future. And there's my keynote address, the keynote speaker you hired for today. So hope you enjoyed your time with me. I got another appointment here at noon, so that's it. Thanks.
Questions for Manager Trunick? Director Houghton.
I know there's been dumping in and around the South Thompson Eco Depot and that frontage road that across the road from the depot and in and around there. And I don't know how we can curtail it, but I've had a few reports and passed it on to Adriana. It seems to be a spot where, and not just garbage, but boats and trailers and all of the above. They just seem to unhook them on a piece of crown land that's on that frontage road with the garbage. And I don't know how we curtail that one, but I did mention it to Adriana.
And to close, and I want to be a chair that gets meeting finished on time. I have 4 minutes. Just a question, when you talk about the after hours or the contractor not reporting it, are these sites where the cameras, is that how we're noticing that they're not reporting it?
It's just through conversations with the contractor or the attendants, some attendants, like they just become complacent. They may have reported it once or thought about it, but they did, usually it's just a bag or two, someone will drop off, or they'll come in and they'll notice that a bin was open, but the paperwork is maybe too much work for what it's worth compared to just throwing the bag in the garbage. But we're really trying to encourage them, similar to a safety program, right? If it's not documented, it didn't happen, right? You cut your finger with a paper cut, you won't report it, but you should report it because it's data that's important somewhere down the line. So we're just trying to educate and train, the attendant, it's okay to report this stuff, but it's just time consuming, and I shouldn't say time consuming, but it's just a challenge.
Thank you. And do you believe active camera monitoring at all our sites would be, would mitigate the damage or the theft overall? Is that something we're looking to do eventually, have all our sites with active camera?
It has proven to work. We started off with the Heffley Creek and South Thompson, which were hit regularly. And we at one time, 5-ish years ago, we had the contractors kind of how much time, how much estimated cost was to, because there's staff cleaning it up, which they wouldn't have to clean up. So that's what kind of helped us invest in the monitoring systems and live patrol at those two sites. We added Boston Flats when we built it because it was just a brand new site, totally different. We do have in the capital plan to add another site, which we chose Lewis Creek. We're looking at the data, Lewis Creek is a good spot to start, but they're not really getting a giant messes in the northwest, in the 70-mile Clinton area. When we do get hit there, they're hitting us hard. So we do have capital plan to add some sites slowly. Just at the speed we do it, we don't know, but it is proven to work.
Thank you for that.
If I could just add to that, Chair, and I fully agree with Kern's comments. Prior to having the actual live monitoring, we had just regular camera monitoring system at these systems, which did prove very effective. It's like, yeah, there's another guy with a black hoodie that broke in. What do you do with that data, right? We'd give it to the RCMP so they have it on file. But yeah, the actual having the speaker, just so everyone can kind of envision how it works, is someone breaks in and then there's a loudspeaker of an actual person who's on it. We pay for a monitoring contractor, and then they're talking to this person saying the RCMP have been notified. We see you breaking in, and that works very effectively.
Sorry. Item number 6, new business. Any of my committee members? Just looking at Director Blackwell's fine. With that, seeing no new business, we are adjourned.